I'm in charge of evaluating the consequence of ID theft in this project. And the idea is to set the scene and to have an idea of the different issues and the different problems. But I propose a few definitions, because that's a difficult topic. We have the difference between the theft and the fraud. I will explain. What is important is to have a taxonomy of the different ID documents, a taxonomy of the different theft consequence, the cyber world, because we need to consider both the physical and the cyber world, victim, country. There are a lot of studies and publications about this topic, but the idea is to give some guidance, at the end of the day. That's not only to make a synthesis, but to have an idea, and then to see how we can address this issue. The theft or the fraud, that's a very, very young concept, because the idea to have a photograph and to have a document is quite new. If you look at the history, beginning of the 20th century in the US, the US wanted the citizens to have a passport, when they came back to their country, and the same for other citizens, to make sure that we have a person and you knew the person, we could make the correspondence between the person and this document. During the last war, it was an issue to identify certain intelligence officer with the wrong document, and we started to have agencies looking at fake document or fraud document, for hiding illegitimate objective. And it was the same during the Soviet period, intelligence officer in different countries, having fake identities. Today, it's something which is quite, that's a huge market, to have to take a photograph, and we have a lot of specialists about passport in this audience, and I'm sure that you know that, the idea to use a passport, to have photograph, and try to fake a passport, that's a huge market. And now we have the physical world on one side, and we have the cyber world, which shows that it's a very, that's a very important issue. I like this slide, which was shown at the Frontex conference 3 months ago. That's quite interesting in 3 years, you see the difference. The documents are more and more secure. We have experts in documents like my friend from Gemato and Morpho. Documents are the more and more secure, It shows that's the identity, that's the breeder document, that's the beginning of the process, which is the weak point. The documents are more secure, the process are more secure, which means that that's the beginning of the chain, which is the weakest point. You are familiar with this kind of picture, if you go to Bangkok, if you go to Singapore, you can see this kind of shops, people selling documents. You want a driving license, or you want a passport, you want a student card, you just need to pay a few dollars, and you can get any certificate, any travel document you want. That's not very expensive, but that's something which happens, and you can find it in certain countries. Just to give you a few figures, on both sides, individual or private, we all live in our garbage, in the mailbox, documents with information, That's something which is typical for both individual and corporate. We have a lot of information, and this information allows to build an ID, and there are a lot of figures showing that issue. As an example, identity theft is one of the main complaints for the consumer today. That's 14% of the complaints, above the debt, the bank, or the other issues. Identity is becoming one of the main issues in terms of illegal activity. The source is given at the back of the slide. Definition. That's very important, because sometimes we confuse the fraud and the theft, and that's very important to know exactly what we talk about. Identity theft, you cannot steal the identity from somebody, because if somebody leaves, he has steal his identity. We have the different concept of misappropriation, impersonation, The idea is that you take the identity, The person can be alive, it can be deceased, it can be conscious of that. You can help somebody by giving your ID. During the last war, you know, the idea was to help certain people to leave their countries, and the victim can accept this situation. The fraud is different, you know, the fraud is based on the theft, you know, but the fraud, the idea with the fraud is to build something, you know, an illegal activity based on the theft, and in terms of law, that's the main issue is once you have taken the ID of somebody, you will do certain illegal activity. The idea is to steal something and to obtain goods or services, which is not the case for the first concept. We have a lot of specialists in ID document. You are familiar with this concept. A passport or a travel document can be forged, it can be stolen bank. That's something that happens in certain countries. Fraudulently obtained genuine, counterfeit, or a fantasy document, like you can find in Bangkok in certain countries, you know, a fake document. All these documents, you know, either that's a fake ID, either that's an ID which belongs to somebody. Just to give you a certain idea, the idea is to have a sort of taxonomy of the different case. You have the physical world on one side, the cyber world. In the physical world, you have plenty of ways to show your ID, you know, or to be the victim of a fraud, you know. A retail transaction, you can have your wallet stolen, your documents stolen, your mail, a mail in a mailbox. The people, they leave their mail in their mailbox during their vacation. And you have plenty of documents, you know, coming from banks, from different agencies, and that's something that gives a lot of information to build an ID. Dumpster diving, as I say, that's important, you know, people leaving their document in their garbage. A person deceased, shoulder surfing, you understand what it is, you know, something you look at somebody, you know, what he's doing, maybe write something on his computer, or he's looking at certain document. And employees, insider threat in a company, that's something that happens. Call center getting certain information from consumers, you know, if you want to give your Visa, your credit card number, imposters, end of relationship with the consumers, you have plenty of different ways. But if you look at the cyber world, you know, what we call the social engineering. Social engineering, that means building a sort of technical service but we will give some example like the phishing, there are different cases. Hacking a computer system, phishing campaigns, database attack, hijacking an account, social network, that's something that is growing in terms of importance, you know. A computer, stolen computer, IT equipment, old equipment. You leave your equipment, you know, your drives, or your memories, your keys, something that happens. The readers contact us, you know, you see there are plenty of possibility to take your ID both in the cyber world and the physical world. The online world is something that is growing in terms of fraud. You know, you don't have face-to-face, that's by definition, that's the idea of the cyber world, you know. We have different steps, the user, the equipment, the ISP, the service provider, you know. You see each step can be a weak link in the process to get something, a service, or to get an information online. I've got this information, yes, from a EU publication, you know. You see that's today we have this growing market of computers and smartphone. And smartphone is growing in terms of importance, you know, to get access to secure services online. As we said, we have different IDs. That was a house presentation. My ID, that's my ID with my bond, that's ID with my TECO, but we have plenty of data that are linked to somebody. In terms of digital world, I have my IP address, my username, my login, the password, the PIN account data, social network. And on the physical world, I have the more standard data, like my address, my given name, Christian name, social security, birth date. All this data, all this information can be a target for illegal activity. Okay, that's quite, you are quite familiar with this kind of information. The email is becoming one of the key services, you know, for exchanging information between consumers and services online. The phishing, you are familiar with the phishing. I won't insist on that. You know exactly what is the phishing, you know, is to give you sort of information, you know. Can you confirm your account? Can you confirm your card number, your PIN code, certain information? And this phishing is certainly one of the most aggressive way to get your information and to get some profit from this information. You are familiar with the schema, with this phishing schema, I won't insist. Cyber world, you know, I won't insist, we have different categories of phishing, you know, the phishing, which is the voice, you get the call, you know, and the call says exactly the same, you know, can you confirm this information, your access to your account. The phishing, that's the SMS phishing, same, you know, you get an SMS and they want you to confirm, they send you a link, you know, to connect to your account on the phishing. But you see that all these attempts are growing in terms of threat. That's interesting, you know, it shows that in 2007 we have got a peak, and then again, and now it's, you know, it's quite important. It's 30%, you know, but we have got a peak, but now we have more and more tools and ways and means to protect our computers. The IT fraud process is something quite standard. You know, you have a victim, you get a birth certificate, you get some information that will allow to get a driving license, a passport, an ID card, and different things. And then you start a new life, you know. But you see employment, you get a credit card, bank account, security facilities, computer system, and then you have a profit on one side. But we know that many activities are linked to terrorism and illegal activities. But the process is, the beginning is to start with a few data, and then you build your ID. Yes, as I said, we have different ways, but you see that the profit and the money and the idea is to get some benefit from this illegal activity. As I said, you have different ways to, once you have get an ID, you know, you steal a social security number, you can get benefit of a diploma of somebody else, you have a new life, you can get married again, because you have a new ID, you can commit different activities, and that's the key. Once you have certain information, is to get to have this breeder document, passport, license, to start something and to have a new activities. Okay, you are familiar. I won't come back to that. The different theft, you know, you see that the profit in terms of getting services and goods is the main one, you know. 28%, the credit card is the main one, The idea is to get some profit and to have access to banks or to financial information. That's quite interesting in terms of typology, in terms of taxonomy. We have different documents, but we see that the ID card is the main document to confirm an ID, and the ID card is becoming the main target for this illegal activity. But you see that we have the health card, which is second, and the passport, which is third. But the ID card is certainly the main target for illegal activity. There is an interesting study from the EU. It was published last year, not 2 years ago, 2014. It gives a lot of information, a lot of figures about the target, the countries, the age, the gender. That's extremely interesting if we want to give some guidance. You see that the typical age for getting a victim, you know, that's 20, 29, 30, 39, you know. That's the typical, that's people starting to work, you know, having a revenue, connecting online, being familiar with the computer. And if you are interested, this barometer from on cybersecurity is extremely interesting on having a sort of picture in Europe about the different countries, victim. You see, they give some information about the countries, your age, and you can see that if we want to build something or to give some guidance, that's extremely interesting to have this kind of information. You see the students, the manager of company, white collars. We have certain figures about the weak point. Please, if you can read this document, that's extremely interesting in terms of figures and information. You see the countries, they will give you the countries, the weak countries. As an example, you see that Romania, Hungary, we have a certain picture, you know, about people being victim, and this document is extremely useful, but you can download this document. I won't spend much time, but it's interesting for our project because we have a clear picture. You see, we have plenty of information, but I won't spend too much time. You see, certain countries where the people are very educated, like Netherlands, you know, have been the victim of phishing, but they have means to meet this attack, whereas in certain countries, you know, the people are not that equipped against illegal activities. As I said, the legal aspect, the legal framework is something we need to discuss during this project, you know. As I said, the theft is very misleading, and the countries have difficulties, you know, to make the difference between the theft and the fraud. And the legal framework is currently changing to meet this threat. As an example, EU is quite strong compared to the US and Canada. We have legislation. We have a certain. We are quite conscious to put our information online, which is different in certain countries. We have a certain use to face-to-face contact, but we know that due to cyber ID and cyber activities, you know, this is going to change, and the cyber world is taking the step, you know, is more important in terms of consumer to service relationship, and it is going to be a weak point. Just to give you an idea, in certain countries, the legal framework is changing. The US has, that's quite interesting. They insist on the means of identification, you know. That's not the theft, that's the fraud. You use a document to do something, and we have the same context in Europe and the EOCD countries, the same in France, because we have a new law. You know, the idea is to take the ID and to do something, and we have a fine and a legal case for doing that. Just to give you an idea, the EU has launched a plant against that. It gives you a lot of certain items, you know, expert group, different scheme, cross-border activities, and certain cooperation between the countries. But that's a typical issue which is considered by the EU at a high level, and there is a cooperation between the countries. That's the end of my presentation. That's another point that we will assess during this project. Stefan mentioned the theft, the database theft of theft document. We have another point to assess within this project. That's the idea of an EU PKD. You know that we have the ICAO PKD, which is to confirm that the document was delivered by a country. There is an interesting topic to discuss within the EU. That's the EU PKD. The idea is to confirm that an ID was delivered either by a government, either by an industry, but that's an interesting topic to exchange or to discuss between, if you are interested in this topic, but that's something that we need to investigate in this project. Okay, that's the end, and if you have any question, please feel free to ask.